Colleen, thank you for taking time to record this today with me. And our goal will be really to extend both of our reaches. That we both work in the CPG space. You and I do similar things in that you provide sales and marketing and management services for brands and their Amazon business. I do something similar for the sales and marketing for brands. And I found it to be helpful if we share with others what we're doing. And
Sure.
my experience has been in any of our spaces, there's going to be quite a few competent people. There will be some, the 80-20 rule applies. There'll be some who are terrible, but in that 20% who create 80% of the good results, there's still a variance both in terms of who their ideal client is.
Right.
And also what I try to do with clients is think, okay, there's going to be people who are as competent or more so than me, but do we connect? Because if you
Yes.
connect with that client well, that might be the difference because, oh, Colleen understands us really well, or Brian, I can work within his quirks.
Yeah.
His
Sure.
his rough edges aren't, I can work with those. So if you will, take a little time, tell us about
Yeah.
what an Amazon agency is, about the Amazon agency you all have, and maybe that specialty or the focus that you all have as a team.
Okay. Definitely. Well, thanks for having me today. I'm
Absolutely.
excited to do this. I know you and I have worked together for a decade, maybe. It's been a while.
Time goes by
I,
quickly, right?
exactly. Flew by. So, just a little bit about myself. I'm Colleen Queso. I have been in the e-commerce Amazon space for about 15, almost 16 years now. Which is definitely aging myself quite a bit. But I used to work at Amazon on the vendor central side, first on grocery, then on health and personal care, and my last team was the pet team. So CPG is a world that I know really well. As I said, directly the 1P side of things, managing brands internally at Amazon, and then I left Amazon and worked for an e-commerce brokerage called the Cost of Sales and Marketing. Most people know them, of course, for the brick and mortar side of the business, but they had just acquired an e-commerce arm, and that's when I joined Acosta. So, left Amazon and then was doing the same thing, working with brands, but much more hands-on in the trenches as a broker slash consultant. And then I started my own business about 10, almost 11 years ago. So still in the same, e-commerce ecosphere. And about a year and a half ago, I merged my small little agency with another agency. Clint George owns Brand Focus Digital, and I knew him when I worked on the grocery team at Amazon. So, this world is very small. You meet people, and over the years, you just continue to bump into them at shows. So, Clint and I used to touch base maybe every quarter, every 6 months. How are things? What are the struggles? What's working? And we finally said, let's merge, let's work together and share resources and utilize each other's experiences. So that's been great. It's been really nice, getting to learn from the team. We have 11 people on the team, so we're not huge. We're small enough, but we still have a robust enough team that we can, get some good ideas bouncing off of one another. We have a creative team, we have a support team, and then the business managers that are, devoted to each brand. So we work primarily within the Amazon space. We also work within Walmart, Instacart advertising, Home Depot. It really depends on the category or subcategory that the product is in. Primarily, our brands are CPG, but we do have some brands that are outliers, right? A perfume brand, we have a workout equipment brand, we have a tool brand, different things like that. But I think a lot of our experience within Amazon working with one brand can be translatable to others, no matter the category. There are some nuances, but a lot of those learnings can be applied.
Interesting. So you said Home Depot as well.
Yes, I think there's about 14 channels that we can, or platforms that we have worked on and feel comfortable, with assisting on those platforms. We have two individuals that have worked with Walmart in the past. I manage a couple brands on Walmart, very similar to Amazon in some regards. You can take a lot of the SEO and the content and pull that over to some of the other platforms, which is nice. I always tell brands Amazon is really kind of the best place to launch and start because it's a really good R&D vehicle. It's a great marketing tool. And then, once you have conversations with other retailers like a Kroger or an Albertsons or Thrive Market, you're able to show your trailing 6 to 12 months of sales history. And that oftentimes is quite advantageous for you to get in the doors elsewhere. So
Excellent.
Amazon is really that entry gate.
And that makes sense. So in just like with Walmart and Home Depot, that's their online side of the
Correct.
business, correct?
Yes.
And has your experience been, because this is a curiosity, that Home Depot sounds really interesting.
Mhm.
Does that then help those brands also with the potential to get into Home Depot? Just like and Walmart.com, I am familiar with that. I
Exactly.
make the assumption there's similar
Yes.
opportunities, but it sounds like that would
Same.
be the case, right? You've proved
Correct.
the velocities there. There's the demand. You've created that demand, and it opens those doors. Well,
That's
that's
exactly
really
right.
exciting.
Yes, it is. Well, like I said, we are very, very heavy on the Amazon focus just because Clint and I both worked at Amazon. Clint was there longer than I was, about 6 years at Amazon. So, we definitely focus on that as being the priority, just given our prior experience, as well as, again, it being such a great launch pad for brands.
And you started working with Acosta probably a few years after my departure and
Correct.
had worked on their natural specialty team. And now it is Impact NS, or they might just call it Impact, but they've
Right.
made changes over the years. They're at the time, and they may still be, we're the largest CPG brokerage in North America.
They've definitely I'm not too familiar with the brick and mortar side because I've always been e-com, but yes, Acosta leaving it's funny, leaving Amazon, this massive behemoth, and then going over to Acosta. I was thinking that when I left Amazon, I was going to this small itty bitty global sales, which was acquired by Acosta for their e-commerce, and they were just several individuals. So it was funny going from the notion of working for a small business to going for quite a big one. But at the time, our e-commerce division was kind of operating separately, if you will,
Right.
from the natural specialty side that you worked on. So it did feel small, and I actually really like that feeling of small, where you're not lost in a number. And I think that's kind of how we've structured our agency. Sure, we can grow a bit bigger, but right now I like the fact that it's manageable. Everybody has their tremendous skill sets that they bring to the team. And, we can kind of pick and choose the brands that we work with, cherry pick, if you will, what really makes sense to partner.
Yeah, no, then that's fantastic. Yes, Acosta is a great CPG brokerage, and they've been good over the years for acquiring pieces,
Yes,
excuse me, like boutique agencies to
that's
round
exactly
out
right.
their offering so that they can be everything.
Right.
But it is right. There is a different feeling for that when you're part of a 10,000 or however many people they have overall.
Sure. I think it's in the 30s.
Yeah, it's significant, right? So it is just a different environment. And so now,
Correct.
because your and your team's experience is so vast within Amazon, within that CPG space, are there, even within those different categories, whether it's pet or grocery or body care,
Mhm.
health and beauty, uh, what is the ideal client? And it might vary a little from category. And
Right.
we spoke about this a little before. There, for a brand that goes, I know I need an agency to help, but there is some threshold, both in terms of advertising dollars they'll need to be able to invest. And each agency has fees, or maybe there's a commission plus, but there's some level of either investment they need to be willing to have, or another threshold could just be, hey, Brian, when they're doing X dollars. So what does that look like, so
Right.
that as someone's listening to this and they hear like, this is the kind of service I need, it helps them filter things out. And for those who do watch or listen, it is great to connect with Colleen and her team and follow them on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Even if when she describes this ideal client, maybe you're not there yet, but I found that it's great to get in all transparency, meet a number of folks who do this. So you can
Sure.
talk to Colleen and you can talk to others so that you begin to get an idea of who's that fit. Do I connect with her
Right.
in the team? Do they understand my category? Because my experience has been, and you are really great at connecting people. I think most of us, as we've been in the business a while, you'll know right away if that person's not a fit. You might make a referral, or
That's
you're building a
precisely it.
relationship for 2 to 3 years down the road. But I'll be quiet.
Right.
What does that ideal client look like
Sure.
for you all and the team there?
Sure, definitely. I think that there's a bit of a range. And to be honest, I've launched multiple brands on Amazon. So a brand, that has completely come from scratch. One of the brands that I've worked with for years is a plant-based milk called Milkademia. I
Yeah,
launched them on Amazon about 8 years ago, and I love launching new brands. Of course, when you launch new brands, there's definitely hurdles and sometimes it can take a little bit longer than working with a more seasoned brand. For brand focused digital, I'd say we go from, a complete infancy stage or early on stage brand that is launching on Amazon. So they're making $0 up to brands that make, 5 to 10 million in revenue on Amazon. Of course, the larger the brand, typically the more budget that they have. And, that's more fun for us, right? It's the 80/20 rule or principle. We want to be working on marketing and leveraging and growing your business 80% of the time. And then 20% of the time is more of kind of that day to day maintaining any of the nuances that happen within Amazon. We're spearheading and we're working through. But the term that you used prior, investing is key. I could have a brand that has already been selling on Amazon for years. And if they're not investing, if they're not retail ready, if they have inventory issues, then truly it's just like working with a brand that's just starting out because you can stop start with inventory out of stocks and things. So I don't necessarily tie a rule to client or brand saying you need to make X amount on Amazon. It really comes down to, do they understand the platform? Because that's a huge plus if people understand and are adept at figuring out Amazon with our help. But also, where is the level of investment? When I have these prospecting calls, oftentimes everybody's idea of leaning in is different. So I'll say, okay, in the very beginning of doing this, I would say with Amazon, there becomes a lot of leaning in and investing and growing brand awareness and reviews and da 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 da. And brands were always like, oh, yeah, yeah, we can do it. And then over time, I realized that level of investment, they might be thinking it's a couple $100 a month to other folks that are coming out of the gate spending, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 in advertising a month. So, that level of investment is very different. And I do try to stipulate, what the percentage of advertising spend should be monthly or annually if they are already established on Amazon. But I try and be as transparent as possible because Amazon is an expensive platform to sell on or to sell to, depending if you're 1P or 3P. And then, just try and break down all of the costs associated with Amazon. And then, of course, agency costs as well, and make sure that the brand has some wiggle room for advertising and promotions. Because without that, your business is kind of dead in the water if you're not really leaning in and investing. So,
That makes
super
sense.
long
So
winded response.
no, that's great. And so for those who might be early stage CPG, you say 1P and 3P.
Mhm.
Is that someone who's fulfilling it themselves, where they're the fulfillment, or maybe it's fulfilled by Amazon, but they're not selling to Amazon? Now,
Correct.
it's been a while since I've managed
No
Amazon
problem.
directly, but
Sure.
historically you could sell to Amazon, they become your customer, or you
Yes,
could sell through Amazon. In
that's
essence,
right.
they're a digital storefront for Brian's widget company.
Correct.
And
Yes.
even then, if I'm using Amazon as a storefront, I can use Amazon's warehouses. That's the
Mhm.
FBA, right? Is that the
That's right.
first
That's 3P.
3P? So I'm using them, and then
Correct.
or Brian's Widget Factory uses Amazon as a storefront, and my warehouse or my third-party logistics company takes the order. Amazon process the order, but we fulfill it. Is that
Yeah. So just to clarify, 1P means a direct relationship with Amazon and a brand.
okay?
So that brand would be working within Vendor Central. Amazon is ordering your products based off of the wholesale costs that you provide, and they're issuing purchase orders. You're sending to their fulfillment centers. Once Amazon receives that inventory, then they own it. And it's up to Amazon to price properly within, the marketplace. Um, there's a lot of pluses to Vendor Central. That's the side of the business that I worked on when I was at Amazon, but there are some downsides. The other side of the business is called Seller Central. It's what you were referring to with FBA. Seller Central is a consignment platform. Amazon is not issuing purchase orders yet. They are, you as the brand manage your inventory and you send in what you think is necessary to ship, but you're only paid once those units actually sell. So it's different from the Vendor Central side or a normal retail relationship where you're paid in net 30 or net 45. So both platforms, again, there's a lot of great pluses and minuses to them depending upon the weight and dimensions of your product. We oftentimes find that Vendor Central is more profitable, but that's also a business where Amazon expects the brands to be doing about 5 to 10 million annually in revenue. So it is not a place where just any brand can sign up. It's truly invite only at this point.
Okay, so it
So
has changed a little bit. That
yes,
makes sense.
exactly.
Okay, so to underscore that, if I have Brian's Widget Company,
Mhm.
and when that where Amazon might be looking to bring us into Vendor Central, that 5 to 10 million, is that on Amazon, or is that the widget
That's
factory here
Amazon.
is okay?
Yes.
So it's outside. Even if I was doing 5 million a year in Vitamin Shop and Whole Foods, et cetera, or 10 million in those the
Right.
natural class of trade, this is
Exactly.
really reflective of
Of
the
Amazon.
widget company on Amazon. Okay.
Correct. Right. And
And
so
and then you walk people through, you probably have a variety of criteria that you'll help that brand determine if they get that invitation, does it make sense? Or, and as you're helping them grow from selling on Amazon, it sounds like too, you probably have a process to guide them along the way so that either they're prepared to make that leap or maybe prepared to just avoid it.
right.
Is that
Exactly. It's quite hard anymore to get into Vendor Central because it is invite only. A lot of vendors have been squeezed from Vendor Central and
interesting?
terminated and pushed towards Seller. So Seller is, I would say, about 85, almost 90% of our book of business now. Seller Central has a lot of really strong upsides as far as the creative elements, reporting, analytics. Vendor Central is great. As I said, the profitability oftentimes is stronger, but there's a lot of nuances with pricing and making sure that inventory feeds through efficiently since you're at the mercy of orders coming from Amazon. So lots of pluses and minuses, things that I would discuss with a brand, but 9 times out of 10, the brands that we work with will be in Seller Central. If you're a huge brand, a nationally recognized brand, you likely already have a vendor code. If it's a new brand that's really seeing some tremendous traction within the industry, then sure, there would be some interest on the vendor side, and you would likely be contacted by, one of the new vendor selection team. Again, majority of folks are within Seller Central, but we can certainly navigate the complexities of analyzing both options if that is if that is on the table, I should say.
That makes sense. And I realize that one Milkademia is a great brand.
Mhm.
I don't know if they still have it, but at one point they had launched some ice creams, and their macadamia nut milk. Often it's not right now, but many times it is in our pantry.
Sure.
It's a great product, and they've done really well. And so when you helped them launch, were they already in retail, or
No,
was this the beginning of their overall brand as well?
correct. A complete start. And it was really fun because that was when Nut Pods was really the only kind of brand that had taken off several years prior. So it was a very, I shouldn't say new and emerging category or subcategory because there was some traction before milkademia. But, now as you look at it, it's Ripple, Califia, there's so many brands that are now tacking into the plant-based milk category or subcategory. And milkademia was just a very fun to launch. Their product tastes amazing. So
Yes.
I, of course, would love to work with brands that I would actually use or consume myself.
Right.
Also, brands that have a mission statement or that are philanthropic and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, those are also things where I find it's a great way to connect with the brand owner on, a more personal level, not just selling their product on Amazon, but really being passionate about the products. I try and be quite healthy in what I eat and drink, not all the time, but that's why Milkademia in the very beginning was a super exciting brand for me just because they were excited about their product and to get it in, customers' hands. And I loved that excitement. That's the same thing, for many brands that we work with. When you can feel the passion about a specific brand, it makes it even more exciting to work with.
Absolutely. And so I realize that the clients can vary from like zero sales anywhere, but it means they'll have some resources. One of the Amazon agencies one of my clients worked with in the past, for them, their bottom line was their clients, their brand partners. I think most of their brands probably are at about 100,000 or more a month, or they, along with spending a minimum of about $5,000 a month in ads. And then that particular agency, I think their entry level fee for them was like $5,000, something like
Sure.
that. They might have had one that was a little lower, but they were generally dealing with, again, either an established brand or brands that had some funding, right? They had those resources to invest. And for you all, for a client where you go, hey, this is the lowest tier, approximately what would they be spending, say, on ads? Because that'll probably help them gauge fees and
Definitely.
things like that. Where have you found is, hey, this is the floor, if you will, and I realize that there's probably no ceiling, but where's
Sure.
that floor for, whether it's a brand from zero or a brand that's just, hey, Colleen and her team sound interesting. Where do we
Yeah.
sort of need to be roughly?
Yeah, I think, like you said, every brand is different, but my rule of thumb is spending no less than about $100 a day. So, again, that's going to average about to 3K a month. That, I've again been with Amazon for over 15 years. So, years ago, when I first started, there was no advertising. Now, I've seen over the years that the cost per click bid prices continue to increase. The landscape is getting more and more and more competitive. So $100 a day certainly is not going to move the needle in really, really saturated categories and specific keywords. So what I will say to brands is if they are very cash strapped, then it doesn't mean that you have to come to Brand Focus Digital and say, okay, we will only accept 10 to 20 grand advertising a month. We'll work with you as long as you're showing some investment. That's, we want to know on your end that you're willing to invest because our team, puts forth a lot of resources in dialing in detailed pages and things. So 3,000 is really the minimum. If somebody has 100 SKUs, then that's not going to go anywhere, right? You would have to pick out some of the hero ASINs and say, these are going to be the bread and butter. Let's focus our budget towards those. But, everybody on the team, I think, has a very similar strategy. None of us will come out of the gate and say, you need to be spending 10 grand. We try to acknowledge and put ourselves in the brand's position. And also, we know that Amazon is adding more and more and more fees all the time. So for some brands, they don't have the funding to advertise. So 3 grand is kind of that minimum. And then as we start to build the awareness and the ROAS, then I think brands feel more comfortable spending. Like I
And
said, rule of thumb, about 8 to 10% is the low end for advertising based on monthly revenue monthly. That's kind of my benchmark.
8 to 10%. And then as they grow, I realize sort of sky's the limit, but is there, as a brand reaches where the cash flow is a little better,
Mhm.
what would that we say, hey, here's optimal. Is that
Sure.
15% ad spend on ads? I
Yeah,
realize there will be variances, probably even within categories, but
definitely.
is,
Yes.
if 10% sort of the floor, where's that next stage where you go, this is a pretty comfortable level. We can
Right.
be creative with it.
Yeah, I would say my rule of thumb is anywhere between like 8 and 25%
Okay.
that it should be invested in advertising. Again, it means, how aggressive are you? How much funding do you have? I actually attended a summit a few weeks ago, and it was interesting. A very prominent HPC brand said that they're only investing 3%. And we all looked at this woman and we were like, 3%? Because she's an established brand. And then, one other brand at this summit said that they were spending about 20%, and they're a massive beauty business. Again, it just depends on where you are in that pipeline. I do think a lot of executives don't understand the nuances of advertising, so they might say, "Oh, we're just going to put a little bit of money towards Amazon advertising, but they're going to put a heck of a lot more towards Google and Meta." And over time, I think brands realize that there is more benefit to advertising on Amazon. I often say, I actually said this yesterday to a client, look at Amazon not only as a retail partner, but as a
Mhm.
marketing vehicle,
Okay.
because more than 65% of customers do their research on Amazon versus a Google or a Bing search. So if you just find out about a product, right, you go to your friend's house and they say, "Oh, this is an amazing product, you got to check it out." You don't Google it and you don't go to the website, the brand's website. You go to Amazon usually because you want to see reviews, you want to see pricing, all of that. So marketing and advertising on Amazon is so fundamental in growing your overall omni-channel sales. It's not just, to pigeonhole yourself saying, okay, I'm spending 8 to 10% on advertising based on the Amazon revenue alone. You could look at it as, okay, what's our overall forecasted revenue for the business? And then say, okay, Amazon will make up X percent. Maybe you're taking some of that budget from your overall revenue and putting that towards Amazon, since it is such a big marketing option.
And HPC being health and personal care.
Yes, that's right.
And is it, I'm just, my guess would be that that brand that was spending 3%, were they probably a brand doing multiple millions a month on
Yes,
Amazon? Was it, so they were still, it was still a very tiny percentage, but it was probably a
exactly.
large dollar amount, relatively speaking.
I think so. It's not a brand that I manage. She didn't indicate how much she does in revenue annually, but I imagine that it's probably about 5 to 15 million on Amazon, just Amazon US. So 3%, to your point, is nothing to snuff at those big figures, but also for a brand that's that established, it's kind of like, why are you not
Interesting. Well, that's
funding
still,
more?
yeah, that's still smaller than I would have expected, right? I mean, 15
Correct.
million is a good brand on Amazon,
Right,
but
right.
I would think, oh, if they're only spending 3%, maybe it's 15 million a month. Because I know there are brands I've watched, like you in the CPG business. I follow Liquid Death on
Oh, sure,
LinkedIn and elsewhere.
sure.
And I love their marketing. It's not the approach I would take, but I love that they're all in on their brand and their messaging. And I think it was this last week, in this last week being towards the end of July, uh, that the CEO had mentioned a launch they did on Amazon, and I want to say it was a limited time offer, an LTO. I think he said they did $250,000. Like, I don't want to say it might have been the first hour, the first day. It was a really significant. It seemed like a lot of money in
Right,
a very very short time, and they do many millions. It was just so
sure.
interesting that
Right,
such a significant number in such a short time. But it is, so you had between 3% and 20%. Very
right,
interesting.
right,
I'm just guessing, tell me if there's any potential to this. If that brand could get away with doing so little in terms of ad spend, perhaps they're either in a niche market where they've captured the right words that others aren't searching for. Maybe they're very effective at driving business from their own email list or text
right.
message list
Yeah.
to Amazon. Is that a reasonable conjecture?
Well, I think what I took away from this person's comment at the summit was that they are not investing enough. The 3%
Well,
is
okay.
is far too. So I'm referencing it as this is far too
Okay.
low.
So it
And she
wasn't that this
acknowledged
was successful for them. They still
exactly. She
needed.
acknowledged that they need to be spending more because several of their competitors are creeping up.
Mm,
We utilize a lot of third party tools, just as any agency does, and there's a lot of really good insights to look at organic, share of voice, how your brand is performing just organically. And then you can also look at paid through advertising share of voice. And those metrics may be very different. And of course, they're going to be very different on how much you spend. So, you could be lower in organic, but you could be really high in paid because you're trying to get that visibility, or vice versa. We have one brand that I've worked with for over a decade. They're not investing much in advertising, and we're seeing a little bit of a slow trickle back in paid share of voice, and that's fine. We're steadily maintaining our organic, but I think if we had spent more, then our organic ranking would be even stronger. So a lot of advertising will of course catapult your rankings for your organic listings, and that's of course what you want. So there's no need to spend X to get Y. Every brand, every category is different. But I will say that it's funny. Years ago, I had a conversation with a brand and they're like, how much do we need to invest to get over 1 million in a year? And I kind of laughed to myself
yeah.
because brands ask me that all the time. And sure, I can try and give you a formula to figure it out, but also, what other brands are going to be launching at the same time? How are brands going to be pricing aggressively? What's happening in the economy at the time? Nobody really planned for all of, the tariffs and things that some
Right.
brands have had to then increase their pricing. So pricing strategies differ. But I did say to the brand, I said, we look at Amazon, yes, that's my job for you, but also I need to understand where your brand awareness building is happening outside, because Amazon will, of course, there's a lot of marketing levers that we can utilize on Amazon, but things that you do externally, driving awareness, whether you're working with influencers, creators, social media, all of that is going to build that pipeline for the visibility, to drive back to Amazon. So again, it's all omni-channel approach. The more you get broader distribution in store, then typically the more successful you are on Amazon or Walmart, just because customers are seeing you in point of sale and everything.
Yeah. And you mentioned something earlier that I think is worth underscoring. I think you said 65% of consumers do their research on Amazon. And I'm a bit that way. My wife, who is the primary shopper in our home, she's very, very much like that. Matter of fact, she could be in Target, and if she sees something new, it won't be now. Sometimes she will go order it on Amazon, but if she'll look at those reviews, right? And
Sure.
I think that is the validation any of us look for as consumers, because then you figure, sure, can someone game the system a little bit periodically, but to game the system for 5,000 reviews or 2,500 or 10,
Correct.
some of these brands will have an enormous amount of reviews, and you filter through them and say, okay, what are they saying? You look for those ones that are detailed and you go, oh, okay, that speaks to my need. I'm getting it. Or that what I thought that product would do, it doesn't. And about, you scroll through like, 10 or 15 of the ones I read said it doesn't do what I want. I'm going to the next one. So that makes sense. And it's probably something that, again, it's worth underscoring for those who are watching the closed captioning or they're listening to this, and realize that how significant Amazon is, because that ties into what you had said about Amazon also being a marketing investment or part of
Mhm.
your marketing as well as part of your sales machine for your business. Because I completely agree, right? People are coming there for customer reviews. They're seeing how you're doing business overall because that's
Mhm.
tied to those reviews. Amazon becomes a very important piece of that business's overall, like I said, channel strategy, overall
Correct.
marketing and messaging strategy. So that's good to underscore, along with what you mentioned when a brand says, Colleen, how much do I have to spend to make $1 million? Interviewed another agency, and he was talking about when you go into a category, he had mentioned very specifically a brand that he had worked with doing creatine products, and initially really, really good, did really well. And you mentioned this too, supply chain. They ran into supply chain
Right.
issues, right? It was a great product, ran into supply chain issues. I don't want to exaggerate, but they were out of stock for, let's say, 6, 12 months. It was a lengthy amount of time. That that entrepreneur came back to my friend, said, "We're ready to go." And he goes, "I wouldn't do it." He goes, "Why?" Like there were like hundreds when you came here the first time and you were thriving. I'm thinking he said something like maybe 4 or 5 brands. There was not a lot of
Correct.
competition. You were leading the pack. You were doing exceptionally well. And then he said there was like, I want to say hundreds. It seems almost hyperbolic, but not, right? It was,
Creatine,
yes, there's
a
all of
huge,
these competitors. And he's
yeah,
like, you really should find an either not on this platform or another product, because you
yeah,
will spend so much money trying to regain what you lost, that year ago or 12 months, 6 months ago.
sure,
And those are things too, right? That those brands have to. I might have Brian's widget. I come to Colleen, I say, "This is a miracle widget." And you go,
right.
"Brian, I looked on Amazon, 800 other people have the same
Yes,
miracle widget you do.
correct.
Maybe not here, or you have to do something so different." And
Yes, I
that's
mean,
got to be a difficult conversation
it is,
because I'm like, I think my baby is so unique. And you're like,
correct.
"Brian, your baby is ugly and dumb. I'm
No,
sorry. It's
it's the
not baby
same.
Einstein."
Exactly. I have the same conversation over and over and over with brands. And, nobody is coming out with any remarkably new concept, right? And I don't mean to sound negative, but it's, the matches of the world or the granolas, the grain-free granolas, all this stuff that I'm like, oh, that's great. And it would be delicious. However, there already are 400 other brands. The third party tools that we use tell us how many items are utilizing, that specific subcategory or keyword. And my job becomes more difficult trying to educate the consumer, or excuse me, educating the client on what we need to do. But where I will differ from the prior agency's comment of, hey, you might not want to list on Amazon, I agree that, it's going to be hard to list. I don't think that it's impossible. You just have to level set the expectation. So if somebody said to me, hey, Colleen, we want to hit 1 million, I'd say, great, what are we doing to really build that? What's
You're
your
going to have to
budget?
invest, right? Yes, you're going to be
Exactly.
willing to invest.
And I think the one thing that you mentioned about your wife shopping at Target, in grocery, it's so easy to get a new customer when there's a small trial size. Nobody really cares about spending $3 to $5 on a protein bar. I mean, sometimes I'll flinch when my daughters ask for something and I'm like, I don't know that we need to do that. But $3 or $5 on the point of sale isn't going to break most people's banks.
Right.
But when you look at the Amazon business, no one can list a $3 to $5 item because the FBA fees alone would eat that up alive. So, what I always say to brands is when you're launching on Amazon, you need to convey the how, the what, and the why. What are the benefits of the product to truly educate the consumer and help them convert? But you also have to have a good trial size,
Yes.
because if customers aren't familiar with your brand, whether it's creatine or a power bar or what, they're not going to invest 30, 40, $50 on something that they don't know. So it's best to really try and start off with a smaller pack size and then hope that that consumer is incentivized to buy a bigger pack size going forward once they like it. So that's why I think that when you look at it from an omni-channel approach, where Target might have your bar on point of sale for 350, great, and then look at it how you're positioning on Amazon. So, a
Yeah, that
collective approach.
that makes sense. And when many moons ago, when I was with Ultima
Mhm.
and we were refining our Amazon offering and we adjusting packaging and flavors and what have you, the variety pack, a small
Yes.
variety pack, and that happens to be a product that's light because it's powder and a stick, was at the time, if my memory is correct, that our small variety pack was our number one SKU in
Almost
velocity.
always.
And it
Yes.
drove the canister sales, the 90 serving
Exactly.
canister sales, through that. So you're absolutely right. Having either a variety pack, if a brand, if you have a
Mhm.
variety of like bars, if you can
Right.
find a way to make that is almost break even, but not
Mhm.
where someone games the system, or just understanding that your omni-channel approach, that your grocery and mass business is trial. in many
Right.
ways. It's sales and
Exactly.
trial,
Right.
but also then that leads to your Amazon business if Amazon for whatever reason doesn't align for say that trial or variety pack.
Mhm.
But yes, those things. And out of curiosity, and we didn't talk
Yeah.
about this before, so not intended to put you on the spot, but one of the things you mentioned, and I think this is true of Amazon agencies that hit some level where they have insights. Do you offer a service where if I, Brian, the widget entrepreneur, could I come to you and pay you some fee and say, look, Colleen, I'm thinking about creating this kind of product
Mhm.
and it's been a passion of mine, but can I pay you for you to help me go in and tell me in Amazon what the competitive landscape looks like so that I
Sure.
don't go out and start that? And if you don't, maybe that's something to do, but
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
know if
that's
agencies do that, but I was just thinking about it as we were talking
yeah.
because, if you have that idea, but can I talk to a Colleen or her team to
Mhm.
garner some insights either, before I've pulled the trigger and
Yeah.
run 10,000 units of something that
Correct.
maybe had I asked you, you go, oh, instead of
Yeah.
those two flavors, Brian, you should have done these two flavors.
No,
But
exactly. There's a matcha brand, a new brand to market that's coming to market. In I worked with them on another business years ago. They sold that business and now they're working on this. And I've been walking them through the landscape of, as you were asking, flavor. They're rolling out some different canisters for their products. And we are kind of in that competitive landscape review and really figuring out what makes sense. So the nice thing about our agency is yes, we are full service and we'll support your brand from A to Z. The only thing we don't do is physically ship your product.
yeah.
We don't have a warehouse, but we have partners that could do it. But we do ad hoc projects. So we can support brands if they have, question about, getting to understand the revenue, how many products are listed already, providing maybe some SEO. And one of our projects that we have consistently been working on, earlier this year, we added two creative gurus to the team. So they've been working on just content and creative projects for some really large brands. And that, again, I think is really exciting because I love the creative element. If you don't have strong images and a video and things like that, then your product's likely not going to sell. Customers, I hate to say this, are rather lazy anymore. They're not reading the bullet points in full detail. They're kind of hovering over images to see
Mm,
if the icons that they're familiar with are there. In the beauty space, are they looking for paraben free,
mm.
sulfate free, things like that, non-GMO, organic and gluten free, et cetera, and grocery. So the creative and content is so important. That's truly fundamental. And for any of the brands that I, have worked with, they've heard me say, like, you have to build the foundation and you have to get retail ready before there's any other efficiencies that can happen through advertising and such. So again, we don't have to be just full service. We could do ad hoc projects, as you mentioned.
Well, that's fantastic. So for brands that again they're listening, you may be at the idea stage, maybe you have some retail business or you've got your own direct to consumer, but if you haven't yet started, connect with Colleen and her team because that can be some of the most valuable whatever you invest, if it's a few $1,000s, whatever that might be, that could save you hundreds of thousands or millions, literally.
Correct.
Or if you're at the very beginning stages, maybe you're still selling some things, you've got proof of concept, but before you go into, running 1,000 widgets to 10,000 at a time, that still is an opportune time. And we do something similar. We will go through brands and do a retail launch checklist. It sounds like
Hmm.
a little bit of what you do. We're
Yes.
looking at pricing and margins, and do they have things
Hmm.
built in for the broker margin, the distributor promotions, etc. And are there case packs? Sometimes if
Hmm.
someone optimizes, say, for their Shopify site, that will be different than optimizing for KHE and Unify, and
That's true.
possibly even different than optimizing for Amazon. It may be, right? But taking that time early on to connect with Colleen and her team can be really a very valuable investment. So, find Colleen and her
Thank
team
you.
on
Thanks, Brian.
LinkedIn and, follow them, learn, because so many of the agencies, and you're one of them, I see you posting content and
Thanks.
Nick and his team did the same. And so I try to follow the agencies and even people who do things that I do because they're offering up content that helps all of us improve, right?
Exactly.
And so even if they're at the idea stage, you're on LinkedIn, you're not, you've got that entrepreneur mindset, connect and follow Colleen and her team, because you'll learn some valuable insights that either you can apply if you're still doing this yourself because you're not quite there, or you're in that idea stage. You're like, okay, here's my list of widget ideas. When they get a little
Mhm.
more refined, you know who to reach out to help refine that a bit more, just from case packs to
Exactly.
flavors to sizes, because all of that plays a role. How
Significant.
there
Yeah,
there are
significant.
beverage businesses that are in Amazon and thrive, but I can appreciate that those beverage brands that are thriving in Amazon have mastered case pack. They have mastered that
Right.
piece because shipping liquids is expensive. And the same probably with
It sure is.
shampoos or any of the
Correct.
body care items that are liquids and heavy, but not $30 units. If
Yes.
it's relatively inexpensive to the weight, speaking with you and your team can help
Mhm.
all of those little nuances, which really are significant, because your co-packer, or you might be manufacturing yourself, you might have found the perfect Uline box, but that box might cost you twice as much in terms of freight if you went from, I'm making this up, from 8 units to 6 or 4. But take some time to, again,
Exactly.
connect with Colleen, her team, follow them on LinkedIn, look for that information. And doing that helps us all thrive and ultimately will help serve your customers better. Because if you really do have a wonderful widget and you're sure that it will change the world in that area, getting some guidance can make all the difference
Exactly.
in the world.
Right. I was gonna say, I mean, I am a huge advocate of making sure that you're asking questions, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So if you aren't
Yes,
familiar, then you aren't asking the right questions, and I get that, but I think just having someone in your corner to, to work with, anyone is always welcome to reach out to me with any questions. I think in this industry, I would love to help people and share my insights as much as I can. So if it's one-off questions or an actual partnership, I'm happy to do those.
excellent. So again, follow Colleen, look up Brand Focus
Thank you.
Digital, follow their business on LinkedIn. Thank you for the
Thank you.
education, the insights, and